Welcome back to Peace Talks for our third episode where Brett, John, and I discuss our top five best and worst single tactic cards. We had a lot of fun with this one. I hope you guys enjoy. Welcome back, John and Brett. John, how you been?
Good, good. Glad to be back.
And Brett?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well, man. It's always good to be here.
Awesome, awesome. This is going to be a fun one. Today we are talking about, in our own opinions, which this has been pretty tough to make, top five best and worst single tactic cards, all things considered. Do you guys have fun making these lists?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I actually did put a little bit of thought into it, so it was kind of difficult. I think making the five worst was actually the harder.
Yeah, every card has its use. We did rank them for fun, and we're going to talk about them. Let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about basically our thought process in deciding what the top five best cards were. Or should we do worst first? What do you guys think?
Best. I think starting positive is a good thing. Yeah, I agree. We could start with the best. Probably be the best idea. The best idea.
All right. So, when you started browsing cards and started thinking about cards, what were you looking for that spoke to you as a best tactic card? John, what do you think?
Just basically general overall like usability, like how useful have these tactics cards been in my play. So that's what I was looking at.
So, like frequency, like you can use them all the time.
Frequency, but also just like but the value too. Like how much value did I get out of using that card?
Gotcha. Brett, you agree?
Yeah, I mostly looked at them, and one of the bigger things that I was looking for is how easy the card is to trigger, how often it is to trigger, and then how big of an impact is it going to have. And then I kind of considered late game and early game. So some cards are really, really, really good, but they're not so good like later game. They're like an early game card, and if you draw them later in the game, they lose value. So I kind of rounded all of those things in my head.
Perfect. I completely agree, and you guys spoke for me with those. So let's jump into it. I've seen a couple top five videos before, and I think the way to do it is start at number five. And it was really hard for me to rank these, but I tried. As far as, 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus 4 versus 5. But let's go ahead and start at number 5. And if we have repeats, it'll just make our discussion faster. So at number 5, I'll go ahead and jump in. I have the Horn That Wakes the Sleepers. In my experience, this card is like the engine jump that you see across the table that you just put your head in your hands. And you're like, oh, it's starting. Here it goes. I mean, okay, my turn starts to get 2 cards. That's like insanely good. And it always triggers, right? Start of the turn. So meeting all those criterias. And also the vow, which Brett was getting into detail with, and I'll let him go into detail with because he has so much experience with it, is also very good. Brett, what do you think about that vow?
So I think the vow portion of the card is actually kind of overlooked, and it's really, really, really easy to make the card exponentially more powerful than just the tactics card draw. Now, one side of that, when Ghost was able to attach vows, I would generally attach the Horn That Wakes the Sleeper to Ghost, because at some point throughout the game, I was going to sacrifice Ghost to remove an activation token from a unit, but being able to return the Horn That Wakes the Sleepers to my hand and immediately play it again for 2 more cards was a pretty kind of bent tactic.
Oh, man.
You obviously can't do it anymore, but it was always my go-to. Like, okay, I've got the Horn, it's going on Ghost. Now his watch is ended. Thank you very much, Ghost. It's time for you to die, and you're going to give me a huge swing because I'm going to remove an activation token, and I'm going to get this card back, pull 2 more cards again. So that's one thing you can do with it.
The other part of it is being able to switch it out for a vow at any time. You can kind of tailor to what's in your hand. So I'm going to give you an example with Dario Naharis. If you've got him in a unit of Sworn Brothers, you can't play the Sword in the Darkness and use his order at the same time. However, if you have the Horn that Wakes the Sleepers on them and you control the letter and you control the swords, you just, before he attacks, you swap Horn out for the swords, and now you get +2 attack dice. And you never had to actively play the card. Now you're passing on the vulnerable token, but giving Dario's unit 12 attacks is going to probably be way worth it. So that's one example. You can do some other shenanigans with Shield of the Realms of Men, but just basically cherry picking the point at which you swap that card out is really, really nice. You can kind of bypass the trigger for playing the card initially and just stick it on for the vow effect.
Right. So if you use the vow mechanic of the horn, then you don't run into the danger of counterplots and things like that, right?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. If you're using the vow effect to swap it out and get the card that you want on, there's really no counterplay that they can do. Once the horn is on and attached, there's no mechanic in the game at this point that can do anything about vows. So it's pretty much they're literally helpless because you're not actually playing the card. You're taking it from your hand and attaching it to the unit. So it's really, really nice.
Amazing. All right. That is my number 5. Let's go into, let's see, who do I have next in the chart? We'll just follow that. Let's go to Brett. Brett, your number 5 is another Night's Watch card. It Shall Not End, Mr. Jon Snow's card. Go ahead and talk about that one.
Okay, so it was really difficult for me to place that card down so low. But that was a combination of my opinions of the 4 cards that I ranked above it. And then I kind of had to consider with my own play experience that this card can really be a dud with bad dice. So generally, I think the combo that comes to everybody's mind is playing it on Ghost. I'll do it in an emergency. It's not my favorite play, though. I want to play it on Jon's unit as much as possible. And it's possible to fail that morale test. And then the other side of that is if they kill you with a melee attack, you still have to make a panic test. So if it's something like a unit with Vicious, or they're in your flank or your rear, or a combination of any of those, you still have to pass that morale test, and then those modifiers come into play. And since it's a morale test, it can be manipulated with a panic token. So while the card is still amazing, obviously, it does have a little bit of drawback in the fact that you have to actually pass the morale test to keep the unit alive, and then oftentimes it's immediately followed by the panic test from the attack. So it's still really good, but I couldn't find myself putting it much higher because of those reasons.
All right, so you're sugarcoating it. Talk about how amazing it is.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. But what are the combos that you can pull off with this? The first thing that comes to my mind is you make a morale test, so you can trigger Jon's healing in his commander's unit, right?
Correct.
And also the activation token it gets removed if you're within short range. So, holy moly, that's actually one of the things I look for when I browse the tactic cards is which ones remove activation tokens. Those are really good.
that one becomes exponentially frustrating for your opponent in Fire and Blood. So basically, with that card in hand, Jon Snow's command unit has 4 ways to remove activation tokens, and of course, in that scenario, when your commander's unit activates, they get a place of victory point. So it can be a huge swing in the game if you're effectively able to activate 4 additional times and then throw down 4 more victory points. It could pretty much be the game. If you're piling victory points on a unit that you're going to kill, they can end up being more 6-7 points, and that's enough to close the game out.
Wowzers. All right. Thank you, sir. Moving on to Jon's number 5, Orders to Destroy. Jon, take it away.
All right, so basically, if you're bringing Gregor Ghislaine, you're going to bring House Ghislaine units. So, yeah, the free attack's nice, but and that's very useful in of itself and has overall utility and on any unit. But where I've seen the most value from this card is when you target a House Clegane unit, and literally you can take a unit, get a free charge, and I'm combining cards, but basically you can Orders to Destroy, just attack unit, get 2 free dice, wipe out a unit that they weren't expecting because maybe they already taken the sword zone and they thought their unit was safe, and then a 1-2 combo and then overrun, and that unit can just mop up 2-3 units in a turn, and that 1-2 combo of Orders to Destroy and overrun, though that doesn't even have to be the activation of the unit, so that they can leave the unit open to activate. So.
Yep, indeed. Yeah, this is an awesome card for Lannisters who are normally reactive and defensive. I completely agree. Brett, your thoughts?
Oh, it's definitely a potent card. It's an incredibly scary card. Like he was saying, the combo potential that you can unlock with it. When I first started with Lannisters, Gregor was actually my choice of commander, but at the time, I guess I'm old school now, like you guys. Varys was a terror for zone replacement because almost everybody had Varys, and at the time, if he canceled the zone, he effectively canceled the card that you played. So it was a little bit riskier to run Gregor because you really kind of rely on that card because Clegane units are a little bit glass cannon-y, but seems like with the change to Varys' timing, just that one little change alone has made him exponentially more powerful, and that is one of the most terrifying cards in the game. So,
all right, moving on. We'll go to our number 4 in the top 5 tactic cards, and I have Overrun. What do you know? Man, have I made use of this card. I guess we could have been reading the cards as we go, but I don't think we need to. I'll use Gregor's as an example. So he does the House Clegane bonus plus 2 charge distance roll. Wowzers. And then there's also the Targaryen overrun, which is plus 2 charge distance if you have the maneuver zone. You get a free pivot. Okay, so you wipe out a unit, melee. You get to pivot like all the way around if you want to. Free charge, and so you're holding on to any effects that are lasting for the turn, boosts that you had like hold the line, and as John mentioned with Orders to Destroy, you can just really take care of some business. So that's my number 4. If you guys have any thoughts on it, go ahead.
I think where this card becomes exponentially more powerful is the pivot before the charge, and it's generally going to end with you charging somebody's flank, and it's a free charge action effectively, and it just ends really badly, and it kind of starts that combo of death, and it's pretty hard to really come back from that, particularly when you're talking about Clegane units that are vicious, have a whole bunch of attack dice, and if they're coming into your flank, it's going to end really badly. Even a unit like Nightwatch Veterans is going to really be hurt after that attack.
Indeed. Okay, Brett, I have you next for number 4. You have one of my favorite cards, Cruel Methods. What's your reasoning there?
So I had to choose that card because of things like the Nightwatch Scorpion, which is not exempt from making numerous attacks. It's a little bit risky to bring Ramsay as your commander in a Night's Watch list, but it's also not terrible if you're going to sell out to the Scorpion. Because if you bring the Scorpion with modifications, now, effectively, if you play it right, no matter what they do with the tactics board, you're getting a free shot. So if they take the swords, you use the horse for a free shot. If they take the horse, you use the swords for a free shot. If they leave both of those zones open, then they're having a really, really, really bad day. And this can all be after Ramsay gives it a free shot to start the round. So that's just one example, but starts being super, super, super aggressive, and then even I've seen a combination of Ramsey and Gregor's Clegane house troops become a very, very disgusting combination. And it's just not what you want, man. Those units attack McCready so many times, it's bad. So that's why I ranked it where I ranked it. And again, that one being so easy to trigger,
Yeah.
it's hard not to give it merit. It's pretty much going to go off unless they have a way to attack a card, unless they have a way to stop a card.
John, you also have this as your number 4, so you take.
Yeah.
Let's hear your thoughts on it.
I'll jump off. I'll jump off Russ's now, and basically my additional 2 cents is it really affects players because this is something that they're not expecting, or I mean, like they know that you have it, but it's very, very difficult to plan for. Basically, you have to assume every round that one unit's going to make a free attack and possibly destroy you, and that's at least in my experience, that's difficult to anticipate and plan. You can plan for it, but then that's you're going to be second guessing maybe a lot of your moves before that.
It definitely is into the head game area of the game a little bit, which fits Ramsey pretty well. A couple things I jotted down because this card I've used quite a bit. I played lots of Bolton. One is, so before the round even begins, is twofold. One, you got 2 turns in a row, which can be devastating. Combining things and being able to trigger things like Overrun. Also, when you play it, you trigger everything if you want to associated with attacks. And that falls into my third reasoning here, such as Bastards Girls, Targaryen Veterans, the Scorpion, and the Hunters, the Ranger Hunters, all can benefit pretty nicely from cool methods. So I really, really like this card. This is actually my number 2, so we'll skip it when we get to that because we've already talked about it. All right, so we're going to move on to number 3 in our top 5 tactic cards. And we're going to double tap John, which unfortunately is also a pass on explanation because he has It Shall Not End for his number 3, another duplicate. And as we've mentioned before, if you want to check out our reasoning, it was mentioned earlier. Fantastic card. So we're going to hop on over to Brett for his number 3, which is Sudden Charge.
Yeah, so I think when people think about the Stark deck, this is obviously the card that comes to mind. It's a free charge, and we've kind of covered some of the benefits of free actions in this game. Free charge, probably the best of all free actions you could possibly have. The thing with Sudden Charge at the time when I picked it, Sansa was still able to basically scry the deck anytime she wanted.
I see.
Now she can't, but I still don't step back from that. I still say it's an incredibly powerful card. This one was easy to choose because its value doesn't necessarily diminish as the game goes on. Oftentimes, I think having it at the beginning of the game is maybe a little bit of a trap because you want to play it so early, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to get a free charge, but then maybe you've kind of separated your units and isolated one somewhere. This card is huge at the end of the game. When you're kind of trying to mop up and maybe you're down a little bit, you've got this one unit that you just can't deal with, and you pull that card, and then it's just bad.
Well, hey, that means Sansa is still useful then, right? End of the game,
Exactly.
It's going to be in your discard.
Yeah. I don't think the Sansa change is the end of the world, but we'll save that for another day. With that said, Sudden Charge in a late round, it's cost me games against Starks. Where I was firmly in control of the game, but they pulled that card late. And a unit like Tully Cavaliers, even if they're down to their last rank, they still throw so many attack dice. And presumably towards the end of the game, your units are just hanging on by a little bit, and they're much easier to mop up. So I'm going to say that this card is actually more powerful at the end of the game for all of the reasons that I just mentioned. And it's game-changing pretty much any time it's played, but definitely late game, it can be the difference in a Stark player winning and a Stark player losing. So.
Yeah, I will note this was probably my least favorite card in the Stark deck because Varys was so popular in my meta here. And then the Varus change to the timing of Varus, and it is an all time favorite. So I agree with everything you've said so far. Any notes on sudden charge, John?
Yeah, Brett, you're absolutely right. Like endgame, it's absolutely devastating. But what I've seen it used for a lot of is, and like I said, it can be a trap. So if you're a newer player and you're like, oh, I get a free charge, let me just go and do it. It can't bite you in the butt. But I've seen it where, you can move up berserkers in a position, whether they know, they can know that you have it, but you can still still out position them. And if they get that charge off, man, it can make a game go pretty one-sided pretty quickly. So but you have to put the tactics and time in. But it is a phenomenal card.
All right, we're gonna hit my number 3 here, and I have Brett's all-time favorite commander, Tyrion, bringing Cunning Ploy. And I mentioned this earlier. It's one of the things I looked for when browsing the cards, is being able to activate a unit twice, basically. But the reason why I have Cunning Ploy here is because, unlike other effects that let you remove an activation token, because then there's time in between them doing something, you could possibly mitigate something from happening. Adaptive Tactics is boom, it's happening. Something's already activated and it's about to take. Cunning Ploy, boom, it's happening. A unit's already activated, boom, they're gonna do another thing, and they're doing it right now. I was playing with Illyrio last night. I was all excited to pull off this combo, and I used him, and I hadn't read his card carefully. I'm a new Targaryen player, and I thought I get to activate again right away. He just takes off a token. So there was a whole turn for my opponent to deal with the problem, which he did very successfully. And I was like, oh, Illyrio's not that great. I want him to be Tyrion. So, and of course, the incredible bonus of not being able to play tactic cards. So your opponent can't play cards if you control letters, which you do usually with Tyrion, is insane. So I love this card. I think it's very strong, and I think it's the reason why people play Tyrion. Let's go ahead and hit the Tyrion master himself. Brett, what are your thoughts on Cunning Ploy?
Oh, definitely. When I was combing through the Lannister deck and I saw that card, I was like, wait a minute. I see a lot of potential with this card. And it was hard for me not to rank it in my top 5, particularly with my Tyrion experience. I will say the downside to the card is requiring that unit I affectionately call the battery unit, which is the unit that has to give up their action. If you end up pulling this card later game, when you don't necessarily have a unit that can afford to sacrifice an action, it can be a little bit underwhelming, but for the most part, it's an amazing card, and it's game-changing. It was definitely the key to me being able to pull it off at Gen Con last year. And then, like you said, the added effect of no tactics cards, if you control the letter, really just pushes that card over the top. My favorite play with that card was to use Cunning Ploy when I controlled the letter to finish off a Stark unit so that they couldn't play the North Remembers, to finish off Jon Snow or Ghost.
Yes,
so
yes. Kill the Night's Watch.
Yeah. So that card it's a big key to shutting down some of the more reactive cards because they can't do anything about it. And so it was definitely a good card to finish a unit off with. It's incredibly powerful. Mixed with adaptive tactics and the ability to cycle it back through your deck, it's a nasty, nasty card.
Yep. I will note with the downside of having a battery unit, there are things that mitigate that downside, such as Poor Fellows, and also anything that triggers on activation, basically. But John, anything to add for Cunning Ploy?
No, you covered pretty well. I mean, double activation of Knights of Cassia Rock is just disgusting. So.
All right, so moving on to number 2, we'll loop around, and I will go again with Cruel Methods, because we can skip it. We've already talked about it. Fantastic card. My number 2, Ramsay Bolton's Cruel Methods. Moving on to Brett's number 2, we have Watcher on the Wall. Brett, take it away.
Yep. So Watcher on the Wall. I think anybody who's played against Night's Watch absolutely hates this card. The obvious advantages I see to it, a free march move, but I think a lot of people really, really sleep on the Vow effect. So the fact that this card has the initial, hey, I'm going to make a free march, and I'm going to march this unit up into your flank, and then the big swing with that card is you make an action, you attack something, you feel good about yourself, but on your turn, I'm marching, and then it's my turn, and now I'm charging you. There's a couple of things with that. Number one, the timing is different for after a unit is attacked and when a unit is destroyed. So if you make a play on Ghost and you kill Ghost, they can use Watcher on the Wall to march a unit up, and then they can play, now his watch is ended, and remove the activation token from the unit that they just marched up. And now Sworn Brothers that have already punched you in the mouth get to punch you in the mouth again. So that's just the card itself. Now the Vow effect, if you control the force, they get +1 to their movement, which Night's Watch is generally pretty fast anyway. Their infantry's movement 5. The trackers are movement 6. The Ranger Hunters are movement 6. Now they could potentially be movement 7, and it immediately happens on that free march. So maybe instead of marching 10, they're marching 12, 14 inches. But the other thing is the free retreat to start their action. So that can become a nightmare situation if that card is attached to a unit like Sworn Brothers, particularly Sworn Brothers with Dario, because now they can retreat out of a combat for free, and then they feel a whole lot better about calling reckless strikes because unless they roll 1 when they charge back in, they're getting those rerolls. And then you start to get into the combinations where you can retreat off to the side. And now do you turn to face that unit and give your flank to the rest of the army, or do you stay still and give your flank to that unit? It becomes a nightmare situation, and it makes you make really, really bad choices. So I'm going to say it's really powerful for the initial card effect, but also the attached Vow is often slept on. And I think that's one of the best reasons to attach the card is for the free retreat +1 movement.
I completely agree. Wonderfully put. I just want to do an editorial note here that you would play, and now his watch is ended first to remove the activation token, and then Watcher on the Wall. So just so folks listening, I believe that's how it would go. Brett, do you agree?
Yeah, I think you're right. So when the unit is destroyed would happen after the attack is completed.
Okay. John, anything to add for Watcher?
Well, I'll just say from I remember when I very first got the Night's Watch, I was discarding that card because I was like, this is garbage. Whatever. I don't need this. But this card is absolutely can turn a game for you, and just make it so that your opponent has no idea where your unit's going to be, or he's got extra movement. He can like you said, retreat. So yeah, it's a phenomenal card.
Yeah, my last note I'll say is when I'm playing against Ramsey, I'm always thinking about Cruel Methods. When I'm playing against Night's Watch, I'm always thinking about Watcher on the Wall. It's in my head. Like, I need to be able to react to a free march when I attack them, because I know it's coming. Like it's if you don't suspect it, it's gonna hurt. Okay, that'll wrap up that one, and we're moving on to Mr. John's number 2 is the old Counterplot. John, why is Counterplot in your top 5?
Basically, it's it changes the basic way most people have to play against a Lannister list. You always have to assume they've got Counterplot, as long as they have cards in their hand. And in addition to that, you can spend it, and then there's still multiple ways with different commanders to get that card back in your hand. So it's the negation of what your opponent can or can't do is just phenomenal. It's just like literally like you change their tactics completely when they have to play against Lannisters because that cool combo you had, or that really nice card you wanted to play. Well, there's a 60 some % chance that you're not going to get it off.
Yeah, this is forming a trend here of when you face an opponent, what you're always thinking about they might have. We keep bringing that up. And so that ties into counterplot itself because that takes care of that feeling. Where you have, I'm really scared of this one card of my opponent. Well, I got counterplot. So it's not 100% reliable, but man, does it feel a lot better having that in your hand when you have that fear in your head, right?
Yep.
The re-roll, of course, on the crown is good. And yeah, so Brett, anything to add to counterplot?
Yeah, I think it becomes exponentially more frustrating when you're playing against a Tyrion player. Not only because of Tyrion's superior tactician order, being able to cancel cards on a 5+ and discard cards. When you're playing against Tyrion, you have to fear playing cards because of his ability to just innately cancel them with his order. And then additionally, he might have a counterplot in his hand to shut down your other card. So as far as denial goes, I don't think it gets any more powerful than Tyrion and his counterplot. And then I'll add to it for just to give people nightmares, but back to a Tyrion kind of list. So Tyrion, his deck, and the Lannister house deck. A Lannister pays his debts. If you control the money bags, you return a card from your hand, or from your discard pile back to your hand. You could be returning counterplot. Intrigue and subterfuge. If you control the crown, not only do you shut off an NCU, they have to discard a random tactics card. Adaptive tactics. Not only are you playing that card and getting one of your old cards back, if you control the letter, they also discard a card. So there's a lot of card discarding and card returning and card denying potential. One of the reasons I stopped playing Tyrion goes back to that negative play experience thing that we had the last time.
Yep.
I'm not kidding you. And I know my good friend John Hurley will remember it. I played my Tyrion list practicing for Gen Con. He was playing Starks. With all of those things combined that I just mentioned, he had 10 of his 11 tactics cards either shut down or thrown out of his hand.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was horrible. He had 11 cards. He got to play one. And
yeah, I've always wanted to have 3 piles since the beginning of this game. I've the first tournament I threw, I actually had them record. You have your deck, you have your resolved pile, and you have your discarded pile.
Yeah.
And just to compare at the end of a game, like how does the stacks look? You know.
Yeah, it's a bad experience, and now that I haven't been playing him, I feel very certain that Tyrion will be at Adepticon, and it's a 64-person tournament, so there's going to be a Tyrion there.
That's so exciting, yeah.
No, it's every bit as bad as it ever was.
You're up for the challenge, though. You're up for the challenge. You're gonna have fun.
I'm up for the challenge.
All right, number 1 for our top 5 best tactic cards in A Song of Ice and Fire currently. We'll start off with me. I have It Shall Not End. I'm going to skip over reasonings because we have gone through it in detail. It is, I guess I'll only add that it is one of the most frustrating cards I've played against. So, just like we've talked about all day long about our top 5s, it's one of those cards that is in your head that your opponent might have the entire game. So that's going to do it for my top 5, and we're going to go on to Mr. Brett with Fainting Maneuver as your number 1.
Yeah, it's my number 1, and it's my number 1 for a couple of reasons. This card kind of, it doesn't necessarily live and die with Harma's presence on the field. Her presence on the field takes it from a really good card to a disgusting card. So a free charge, then you immediately get to move into a flank, assuming that getting into the flank is a legal move. And then if you spend Harma's order, whatever just charged you for free into the flank now gets +3 attack dice, and the defender becomes vulnerable. So there's any number of units that you can take and just say, well, this has become a nightmare, but I'm just going to even say a lowly raider unit
free charge into the flank, 9 attacks, hitting on 4s, assuming no gang up, and you're vulnerable. It's even from the worst troops they have to offer, it's not a good situation to be in. And then let's take that and make it exponentially even worse because of the Order of Harma's Vanguard Commander and that card. You can play the card and then use her ability and immediately pull it back into your hand.
Oh.
The downside being you can only do it when you claim the horse, but I still left it at number 1 even with that downside because that is a control element. Your opponent sees you play the card, your opponent sees you immediately put it back into your hand. Now, if they're the first player the next round, they kind of don't have a choice but to take the horse. And forcing your opponent to play the horse immediately or else eat a free charge is a huge element of control. So this card is psychologically and on the board, it's very, very powerful.
All right. That sounds incredibly amazing. Let's just walk through real quick the steps that you just laid out, because even for me it went a little fast. I haven't seen this combo happen yet. So you're saying first you play the card.
Correct.
And that is when you claim the horse zone of the tactics board.
Yep.
You replace the effect, so you get the charge, and then when you charge, you use Harma's order.
Okay, so I'll slow it down and lay it out. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Well, I'm loving it. I haven't seen it done yet.
Oh man, it's horrible. So you claim the maneuver zone, and I'm just going to add to this and say you're almost always going to do that with Styre for the free D3 wounds immediately.
Oh
You claim
yeah.
the maneuver zone with Styre. You influence the unit that you want to charge. When you claim the zone, you play Fainting Maneuver. You replace the zone's effect with one friendly unit and make a free charge action. And if they're successful, you place them in the closest flank arc, treating it for all purposes as if you had charged that flank.
Okay.
Next step, Harma's commander ability. When you claim the maneuver zone on the tactics board, you may return one of Harma's commander cards back into your hand. As the active player, you can resolve Fainting Maneuver first, and then you can resolve her commander ability and return Fainting Maneuver right back into your hand.
Really?
Yes, so that's that step of it. Now, the unit is in the flank, and they're getting ready to attack. Harma has an order, superior flanking, gives when a friendly unit attacks an enemy in the flank or the rear, they gain +3 attack dice, and the defender becomes vulnerable. So all of that nastiness can trigger from their very first claim of the maneuver zone.
Wowzers.
Yeah, it's very, very nasty. So you think something like a bear skin changer that doesn't offer armor saves and is vicious. You Fainting Maneuver this free bear, and they're on a small tray, so getting in the flank is going to be easy. 4 attack dice now. The vulnerable doesn't matter, but it's 4 attack dice. If you put Styre on the bear, it's 4 attack dice that hit on 2s with rerolls, plus D3 wounds, and then a vicious panic check from the flank. And this is from a free bear. So this card terrifies me. I feel it's almost mandatory to put Varys in your list to counter free folk, because Harma is a popular commander, and it doesn't matter what unit you have. That little combo is going to put a dent in any unit that they do it to.
Interesting.
Maybe even kill them.
Very nice. All right, for our last and final top card, number 1, John has Counter Charge. John, why is Counter Charge your number 1?
People would be surprised to hear that, but I've playing Tormund. He's been just phenomenal. Like being able to okay, you attacked my raiders. Okay, you did a lot of damage. Okay, well I'm just going to charge back in, and I'm going to charge, get a free charge, and guess what? Next turn I get to activate, and right after that charge, I get to activate and kill and then I'll finally just kill off whatever it is that I was trying to kill in the first place. So, yeah, it has a lot of fun synergies, and I think the Baratheons have it as well.
Yep.
So it's Yeah, so it's game changing in my mind because basically it's here have 2 activations in a row, and then typically to have 2 activations in a row, and that's pretty darn strong.
Yeah, absolutely, and it also goes with our theme of free charges for our top fives. Um, if you're in Tormund's unit, you can reroll your charge distance die, which can be crucial. But also, like you said, with synergies, you want to be engaged with multiple friendlies, right? So you can make that happen. Any other notes, Brett, that you've had with experience with countercharge?
Oh, I'm going to give myself and the listeners more nightmares about these free folk. Imagine that you've influenced a giant with Styre, this newly revamped giant that's doing a minimum of D3 plus 2 wounds if it hits you on a 2. Styre makes that 2d3 plus 2. You countercharge that giant in 2d3 plus 2. You activate and you attack again 2d3 plus 2 for a whopping total of 4d3 plus 4 at minimum. Back to back. I don't see much surviving. I think at that point you're relying on terrible dice rolls. Even if they roll all ones, it's 8 wounds. All ones for their D3. It's 8 wounds with panic checks. Bad.
Bad news. Bad news, Bears.
Free folk are bad people, okay?
Hey, leave those free people alone. I'm going to call Chase.
I say Chase and I disagree, but yeah, go ahead.
All right, we're going to jump right into our top 5 least favorite cards in A Song of Ice and Fire, starting with number 5, a repeated card. I'm going to start with my number 5, Deadly Riposte. Riposte. Wait, are you serious?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Riposte.
Okay, that's even worse than the other ones. Okay. So this is a card that, well, first of all, I will say with a grain of salt, I don't see much Jaime on the field, even with the changes. You playing Lannister, people just gravitate towards everyone else, it seems. They're just so good. But anyways, looking at this card, it's before attack dice are rolled, and that's one of the reasons why it's here. It conflicts with his attachment, his commander attachment, so it's not as frequent to pull off. And then you also have, for each miss, the enemy suffers a hit, and it's like, okay, so I can still block it. So it's just not a great card in my personal opinion. What are your guys' thoughts?
I included it in my 5 worst as well, which I guess we'll see that in a moment. Yeah, it does conflict with counterattacks. That's part of the issue. The other issue is it triggers off of misses. I guess with a weakened token, it might not be the worst thing. And I think it synergizes with Eris Oakheart, the Kingsguard, with the -1 to hit. But it's really, it's just not overly impressive. I think a lot of the times you'll get more mileage out of counterattacks. I just don't see it as a fantastic card, honestly. I don't really know what else to add to that. Jaime is a rare commander anyway.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think it has to do with the timing conflict with his unit's order for counterattacks, because he does get the benefit of 2 additional hits if you attack his unit.
Right.
But I think more often than not, you would want to call counterattacks over that anyway. So.
Yep, I completely agree. And I will say, let's go ahead and throw this out there. We'll make it a listener's comment challenge of, for every single card we have in our top 5 least favorites, if you guys are listening and think, what? I love that card, please put it in the comments below and teach us a little something about why you love one of these cards that we're mentioning. So maybe Deadly Riposte. How do you say it again?
Riposte.
Riposte.
So if you think about it, I can't remember what it was from,
but I want to say it was a commercial or maybe a movie. Maybe it was Robin Hood Men in Tights. I could be way off, but at one point there's a scene where they say, touche, en garde, riposte. And that's how I know how to say it.
Okay, movie knowledge. Got it. I'm taking your word for it. All right. Let's move on to... Who is in the middle? I keep forgetting. Brett is next with number 5. Another Lannister card. Traitors, I will have their heads. Brett, why is that number 5?
So, triggering a panic test is nice. However, it's incredibly situational. 2 to 4 wounds if they fail. It's not bad. It's a good finisher. It's not quite seriously on the crown kind of trigger, but then the downsides of the card, I don't see it outweighing the benefits of maybe making an enemy fail a panic test. They get to pick one of your units to become panicked and another one to become vulnerable, right?
Weakened.
Weakened. Well, either way, 2 tokens for 1 panic test is pretty terrible when there's no guarantee that they're even going to fail it. Highly situational, big downside. I'm not sold on that card at all. I know the power of panic right now is great, but that's a tough one for me.
The power of panic. I like it. Yes, I completely agree. But it also goes along with your line of thinking. With our last podcast, we talked about Melisandre coming, and you pretty much said the same line here. With that one is you can still just pass the panic test. So it's not all doom. It's not that great. John, any thoughts on this one?
Brett's points are all valid. It's very, very situational. Could situationally make an opponent drop a what do you call it?
Objective token.
Objective, and that could swing a game pretty heavily.
Fair point. Your number 5 here is listed as Distraction Tactics. John, why is that number 5?
And I'll preface this that with the upcoming release of Skin Changers, my whole conversation will lose water. But right now, just the idea of trying to get multiple units engaged with one is doable, but just very situational. And if the way I've seen it and the way I've played my free folk is, if you have prefaces that with the upcoming release of Skin Changers, my whole conversation will lose water. But right now, just the idea of trying to get multiple units engaged with one is doable, but just very situational. And if the way I've seen it and the way I've played my free folk is, if you haven't destroyed something by the time you've got more than 2 units engaged, you're in a very bad situation, and that -1 to hit, stacking is not going to save you.
And also, it's one of those cards. It looks like I'm scrolling through the free folk deck here. One of quite a few, 3 that don't have a bonus. It's just that's it. That's all you get. All right, so we'll go ahead and pop up right away into number 4, which John has listed as Stannis Baratheon's card, Oath of Duty. What are your thoughts, John?
The trigger's the main issue. The trigger, there's so many other cards in the deck that you'd want to play Last Stand. So, it's just plain simple. You'd rather play this over Last Stand. Also, another thing is when you're attaching this card, if you get additional bonuses from Stannis' unit, but Stannis already gives that bonus out, so the can never become panicked already. That's eaten up there. So
I agree. For it's a nice number 5 spot with really the only reason you're playing this is to give +2 attack dice to Stannis' unit, which isn't terrible, but the card itself definitely doesn't shine. Brett, what do you think?
There's some merit to making a unit fearless, which is effectively what it does. No penalties to morale, never become panicked. But
Where would you want to stick it? On your Sentinels, maybe, who are still stuck at a morale 7, which isn't spectacular.
Maybe on your cutthroats.
Maybe on the cutthroats, yeah. But no, I mean, I think John nailed it. The real appeal is putting it on Stannis to get the +2 attack dice, but you're kind of suffering there because he's already not able to become panicked. And just the big thing is, if you've got this card in Last Stand in your hand, you're going to play Last Stand, and they're now having 4 cards that trigger when units are destroyed.
Yeah, you don't want four units dying in a game.
I don't have throwaway units with Baratheons to just kind of let them die and hold on to these cards. I'm going to pitch these cards.
Well, not yet. We don't have throwaway units yet.
We don't have throwaway units yet. This is true.
All right, that's a solid number 5. Moving on to Brett's number 4. We've already talked about Deadly. I'm never going to get this right.
Reposte.
Repost. Okay, I got to think of the word post. Reposte. Okay. If you want to hear our reasonings, it's the very, very beginning of our top 5 least favorites. It's my number 5. So we're going to move on to my number 4, Northern Defiance from Mr. Ned Stark. And this one jumps out at me from personal experience, where I draw it and I discard it. Not only do Starks generally have good morale, so the trigger is very infrequent, but the bonus of if Eddard Stark fails the morale test, and it's like, really? He's not going to do that, I mean, almost ever. So that free attack, I don't think I've ever pulled off once, which it looks nice on the card, right, written. It's like, oh yeah, cool, free attack. It's never happened for me. So, anybody have any input on Northern Defiance? I just toss it.
I'm going to go crazy with this one. And I know people listening are going to raise their eyebrows and ask me what the hell I'm thinking. Eddard Stark and a unit of bowmen. Bowmen have gotten substantially more powerful. That unit will not benefit from lead by example because you don't want them in melee. But bowmen with a morale 7 are likely to fail a morale test. Bowmen are a good target for the crown, so they would get targeted. If you've ever played with bowmen, especially with the new changes, it's actually really hard to get to them and actually start attacking them. So they make you panic, you pass, and then it's an attack, not a melee attack, so he will auto pass, and then he gets to take a free shot at you.
Yeah, the problem, like you said, is the melee. And Eddard's Order is really helpful, and that's on melee only.
Yeah, so it's very situational, a little bit crazy, but it could potentially give you some more volleys with him. But for the most part, I agree that Eddard is generally in his honor guard.
Yeah.
Particularly with panic damage being so devastating. Fearless is an excellent keyword.
Yeah.
So the odds of his honor guard failing a panic test are pretty slim to none. So I think you're hoping for the best outcome. What I generally saw in my meta was Eddard Stark in a unit of the old great axes. Lead by example with Mighty Cleave was just stupid. So
yeah.
And then great axes were somewhat susceptible to panic. So when Executioner's Fury was a terror to behold, getting that free attack was pretty much death for a unit. But outside of that, I generally agree, and I think the majority of people running Eddard put him in honor guard, and they probably pitched that card.
Yeah, I was going to say the silver lining is great axes, because if you're getting attacked when you fail your morale test, which might be like half the time, I don't know, then you're engaged, right? So
yeah, but it's only going to work if they didn't charge you that turn, because if they charged, you didn't start the turn engaged with them, so it's just going to be a really vanilla attack. So again,
it's even more rare, man. Okay.
Yep. It's adding situational to an already situational card.
Yep. Okay. Well, then, yeah, my reasoning holds up. Anything to add, John?
No, you're right on
All right.
mark there.
We're gonna move right along then, and number 4 we're gonna go up to number 3, and we'll just loop around back up to me with Baratheon Conviction. This is one of those cards that I was scrolling through because I've only demoed the Baratheons, but playing against them I haven't seen it used. So let me bring it back up. Baratheon Conviction is start of the round. Attach this card to an infantry. Discard it when they fail morale. Okay, so that's downside number 1. Number 2, while it's attached, if you control Crown, suffers only 1 wound from panic tests. And if you control letters, defense save rolls of 6, block 2 hits. Okay, so yeah, I guess the benefits are okay. Very, you gotta control the zones, and then you get a little boost, and I guess the silver lining here is you get both if you control both zones. So I guess that's what you're going for, especially with Alistair Florent. But start of the round. That's my biggest thing here. The Baratheons have so many start of the round things that I'd rather play the other ones. So that's my reasoning. If you guys want to change my mind or weigh in on Conviction.
I'm going to echo the frustration with the start of the round because Stannis Baratheon is a pretty popular commander. He's also got start of the round cards. I think tactical approach is always going to take priority over this card. So you're either holding on to it to the next round or you're discarding it. Unless you just, it's so situational on card draw. So it just depends. If you draw one start of the round card every round, then maybe it's okay. But generally, I'm with you. It's not great. So essentially, one time you fail a panic test, you're going to take 1 wound, and the card's going to be gone. Critical blocks are nice, but it's not a wonderful card. In the games that I've played Baratheons, I never actually attached it because I used Stannis, and the priority was always to get tactical approach on. So
yeah, and I will say, unlike rolling attack dice, I think there is only a negative, meaning you can only have vulnerable, right? There is nothing that allows you to re-roll your defense saves in a positive manner. Is that correct?
That's correct. I don't think there's any.
So rolling the 6s to block 2 hits is like maybe if I'm lucky. You can't charge and re-roll. You can't. There's not abilities to let you re-roll defense dice yet. But yeah, so it's just not. It's not my fave at all. Anything from you, John, on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I've used it once where it was beneficial. It saved my Stag Knights from dying 1 rounder later. But yeah, like you said, it's very, very, very minimal.
All right. So let's do Mr. Brett. This is a card that's also repeated with me. So we'll go through it now. Brett's number 3 is Fear Keeps Man Alive.
I wanna meet the person and shake hands with them who's been able to trigger this card multiple times, have it impact the game. First of all, you expend the panic token first, and then they have to fail a morale test without the help of the panic token. The exception to this card being in Lannisters with Cersei, and you have Hear Me Roar in hand to put that panic token straight back down. But the other downside to it is the wording. The only action they may take is a retreat. So they don't even have. They don't even have to retreat.
Right.
I think the idea of this card is, well, I'm going to make them retreat, and then when I take my turn, I'm going to charge them and get my rerolls. And in that sense, it's really cool. It's like, yeah, that'd be awesome if I could pull that off. But then when you realize they can just take no action, it loses some value. And then, yeah, like I said, you expend the panic token first, and then they have to just pass a straight up panic test. Ugh.
Yeah.
Oof. It's not
Yeah,
great.
I've never. Now here there's a couple silver linings I'll point out. One is what is it called? Adaptive tactics, adaptive methods. So if you have another condition token and adaptive methods in your hand, you could then use it as a panic token when they make their morale test.
That's fair.
And number 2 is the House Bolton Restoring Wounds is not dependent on the retreat, so they do have to fail the morale test for you to restore wounds. But yeah, this is one of those I toss. I completely agree. Man, it's tough to make this one work. Any thoughts, John, on this one?
Yeah, I've gotten off once on a Free Folk Raider unit, and I was like, woohoo, okay. 4 dice, no attack, okay, big deal.
Got it.
Yep. It's the card that honestly I think it maybe keeps Roos out of a lot of lists because I think he's a fantastic NCU commander. His other 2 cards are great. I know they probably have no intentions of changing any tactics cards at all, but yeah, this one's pretty rough.
Well, maybe an FAQ on what you pointed out with the may word. They may take this as retreat, so.
Or even just perhaps remove the expend the panic token from the unit, and just when a panicked unit activates, then they have to take a panic test, or they have to take a morale test or retreat.
Yeah, but like you said, I don't think they're going to errata tactic cards.
Yeah, I don't think they will.
But in the case of, they could word possibly in the future that taking no action is an action. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that would be included in the options. Therefore, you could only retreat. So I don't know. I just haven't pulled it off. I don't like it, and I love Boltons. So let's move on to, where are we? I got sucked into that one. I do not like that card. John's number 3 is Meticulous Planning. John?
Yeah. Well, the first off, you have to discard for those that don't remember, it's Mance Raider, start of a friendly turn, discard 1 other tactics card, search your deck for any 1 card to add to your hand, then shuffle the deck afterwards. Being able to mill your deck for what you need is always an exciting and great thing, but with wilding the diplomacy, getting that nerf of not being able to like the opponent being able to choose not to activate their NCU, and predictable maneuvers being the other one you're going to want to grab typically. It doesn't seem exciting, and then the rest of the free folk deck is very situational, which is, I guess, you want to. That's why you want the card, is to pick the card situational. But it just there's not one single card in that deck that I'm like, oh, okay, well, discarding this and another card, basically spending 2 tactics cards to get one excites me that much.
I completely see your point. Any thoughts on this one, Brett?
It's not great. There's not it's nice, I guess, if you absolutely needed a card, but discarding that card and another card, it can be pretty rough. It's got a lot of luck elements to it as well. I could see myself probably discarding that card. I think when Wildling Diplomacy was at its most potent, where they kind of didn't have a choice but to take those wounds, that was the go-to. I'm going to discard this card, and I'm going to search my card for Wildling Diplomacy, and then I'm going to poach their dog, or we'll finish off a unit, whatever the case may be. But now that they can take the NCU and do nothing, it kind of makes Wildling Diplomacy a lot less game-changing. So, yeah, I'm just not totally sold on that card.
Agreed. That does it for the top 5 least favorite number 3. And at this point, I will... Moving on to number 2 in our top 5 least favorites, we will wrap up. We will wrap around the chart back up to John with Blood of the Dragon, which is the new Targaryen faction card that you can attach if you successfully charge, and you cannot fail panic test or become panicked. John, take it away.
So the reason why I put it up there is not the card itself is phenomenal. I mean, you put that in a Lannister deck, and that card would be just bonkers. Reason why I say that I don't like it in and why I don't like it is in a Targaryen army right now with what's available. You don't want any of your units hanging around in combat, and so getting punched multiple times. I mean, it could, and I have played games where I've saved a unit of what are they, not raiders? What are they?
Screamers.
Yeah, the screamers, and they've lived, but the unit was already in a bad position, and that they shouldn't have been, and it basically bailed me out of them dying that round. But still, it's not your cavalry. None of the cavalry you have wants to hang around and fight. So it's It's just
I see what you're saying. So you're not getting the most bang for the buck out of that card currently.
Correct.
All right. And this was on my top 5, I will admit. And then I played a game last night, and the game was Dance with Dragons with Targaryen. And coming to the game, I'm like, great, my least favorite game mode with this army as of right now. But Blood of the Dragon saved my bacon, let me score a point, and so I took it off my top 5 least favorite, just as a reward. Like, thank you, Blood of the Dragon, you're coming off my top 5 least favorite. Brett, what do you think on this one?
I think I'm just a big. Damn it! I'm really fumbling with words today.
No worries.
Let me regroup and reform. I'm still of the thought process that panic is one of the most potent things in this game. I play Night's Watch. I use Veterans of the Watch. They generally don't succumb to attacks. They succumb to panic. That's the case for pretty much everybody. I think their units are eventually going to be ground down by panic tests. So being able to automatically pass panic for a guy with panic dice as crappy as mine, it's going to hold some value to me, but that's me personally. But I think, as Carl mentioned, in scenarios where you drop tokens when you fail a panic test, it's a pretty foolproof way of holding on to it. I think every faction cares for the crown now, not just Lannisters with Cersei, because it's always worth a shot to do D3 plus 1 wounds.
Yep.
So crown zapping Dothraki units that you can't reach is a valid way, at least, to diminish some of their attack. So I can see some validity to it.
Agreed. It is definitely still, though, my least favorite of the deck. And what a deck does Targaryen have. So I can totally see John's point, and like I said, it was up there on mine as well. So let's go over to Brett's number 2, Stag's Wit.
This is another one. My play experience with Baratheons kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for this card. You have to start the turn engaged, which is a theme for a lot of their cards.
Right.
And then you can remove condition tokens that are on you. My problem that I found with it was I had my cutthroats generally in a position to charge, and they were weakened, and I could not remove the weakened token before I charged.
Right.
It really agitated me a lot. The other thing is, if you've got a vulnerable token on you and they've charged you, maybe they're probably going to expend it right away, so you don't have the opportunity to remove it. If you know that a charge is coming, you still don't have the opportunity to remove it when they activate because they're not engaged yet.
Right.
Being engaged as a condition for most of their deck is pretty rough, and that's why I put it up there. I've not really seen this card used too many times to great effect, and maybe the listeners can come check me on this one, because I just don't see a lot of Baratheons. I picked up and played them a few times because they weren't being played, and it was kind of a prove to the club that they're not as bad as they seem kind of thing. But Gary did run like 45 games with Baratheons, and he echoes my sentiment that it's a terrible card, and his experience trumps mine. So
there you go. For all reasons mentioned, I completely agree. John?
Yeah, absolutely. You've hit it on the head there. I mean, between the 6 cards that you can play that triggers off of a friendly engaged combat unit activating, Stagger Resilience giving you the heals back, Hold in Line giving you the plus attack, Stagwit definitely feels like the booby prize.
Indeed, indeed. Hopping over to my number 2 is the repeat that I mentioned before, Fear Keeps Man Alive. Listeners, tell me how to use this card, please. Anybody out there. I still haven't. Like we mentioned before, you can listen to Brett talking about it. It was his number 3. It's discarded, pretty much. I mean, I've tried to do it. Anyways, let's move on. Number 1 for me, which I need to bring up for a refresher. It's not a faction that I play. Is There's Too Many. And that card is a free float card that says if there are 2 or more enemies engaged, they suffer a panic test with -2. To be fair, this, as John mentioned, is before Skin Changers, as far as I've played against. And also, I think I wasn't valuing the panic test effects with the changes. But still, when a combat unit activates, 2 or more enemies engaged, panic test -2. So there are so many things that can prevent this card from being useful. You gotta have 2 enemies engaged, and you gotta hope that they fail the panic test. Yeah, so just not a card that I would keep around. If I had it in my hand and didn't get to use it, I'd probably toss it. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I concur. I think I've had success with it like twice, and it did a little damage. It got the best it did for me was it got 1 rank off an enemy. But yeah, it's very situational, and I do that every time I have it. If I have a chance, I play it, and if not, by the end of that round, I dump it.
Yeah, in fact, I think I should have put Fear Keeps Man Alive at number 1 because of my personal feelings of it. But this card just speaks to me as just not good, like just in bold print. Brett, can you change my mind?
No, I don't think I can. I played some games with Free Folk to kind of, this was pre the 1.5.1 changes, and it was, again, just a situation where I was just trying to kind of prove a point to the club, like, hey, this army is incredibly powerful, and you're just not seeing it. And they're, oh, Free Folk are terrible. No, watch this. And so that was my experience with Free Folk, was kind of trying to prove that they were better than people think. I drew that card in all the games that I did play with them, and I found it pretty difficult to get it triggered. For most of the reasons you guys have mentioned, I didn't find a reason to engage with multiple units. I used the raiders as roadblocks, so I wasn't feeding more than 1 unit to a unit at once. I would just give them 1 and have another one ready to go in there and bog them down if they managed to kill the first unit that was tying them up. And so I just didn't feel any reason to have more than 1 unit engaged. So I'm with you. It wasn't spectacular for me. I wanted to trigger it. I really wanted to put a dent in some Knights of the Castle Rock, but I just couldn't justify sending 2 units into the Knights when I was doing a nice job of holding them up with just 1 unit. So,
and I think another thing that I'm missing in my reasoning is the raid leader has the same trigger, right? So you can't do both.
Okay.
I'm actually going through the. I knew there was more reasons why I dislike this card, and I can't find them. But anyways, John, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, like you're saying, absolutely. It's so situational.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to Brett's number 1 least favorite, the Crippler's Infamy. That's kind of a new one, so I'm gonna pull it up and read it, unless you have it memorized. Let's see. I think it's Vargo Hote. We have when a weakened enemy combat unit activates, suffer a panic test. They suffer a panic test. Before they roll, you may expend their weakened. If you do, they roll 1 additional die and discard the highest result. Brett?
Yeah. panic tests are powerful. A straight up panic test, I'm not overly impressed. I know that Vargo passes out weakened tokens. I looked at this one through thinking outside of the Lannister box because for whatever reason, neutrals seem to really shine in Lannister. So it's like, well, with Pycelle and Vargo as my commander, I will have an abundance of weakened tokens, and then I have Cersei to really help them fail this panic test. But then once you remove those from the equation, because not everybody likes Lannisters, it becomes pretty lackluster. If I'm playing like a neutral army, or if I'm playing Baratheons or any other faction without the ability to pile on weakened tokens, I don't really know that I want to expend that weakened token to make them roll an additional dice and drop the lowest. And I think that's a situational one. Rolling 3 dice and dropping your lowest may not even be better than a panic token anyway, and you gave up a weakened token to do that. Now, ideally, if you've got a weakened and a panic token, but seriously, expending 2 tokens to make an opponent fail a panic test, and then it's up to the D3 gods how many wounds they take, pretty rough, man.
Yeah.
It's a pretty bad card, I think. I don't really like it.
I think even just as a blanket of, hey, I have spots to fill for resources, and I'm referring to the tactics deck, and I'm gonna fill one of those spots with trying to get someone to fail a panic test. That's it, and it cost me to do it. So like, I completely agree. John?
Yeah, it reminds me of the same reason why the Free Folk card is the same thing with that panic, where the panic tests are so situational now. It's and in addition, having to pay a weakened token, which is what it's a high defense, is not worth it.
Right. I mean, in a Free Folk, particularly, you have a massive swarm of units that are causing panic tests, hopefully anyways, right? So having one more panic test is like, okay, I'm going to fill my slot of resources with that. So agreed. Moving on to John's number 1, Bulwark Formation. So I'm going to pull that one up unless you have it memorized.
I've got it here in front of me, but yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Start of the round. Attach this card to a friendly combat unit until the start of its next activation. When attacked, this unit may not make attack actions, but gains +1 defense, and then save rolls and attackers do not gain charge, flank, or rear bonuses against this unit. It's foregoing the attack action really puts yourself in a tight situation. I mean, obviously the idea of this card is, from what I can see of it, is you throw your vets out there, they go out, and then you attach at the beginning, and then all the stuff that they're planning to charge you with is going to fail because you have 2 ups and no rear or flank or charge bonuses. But you're limiting yourself on the attack, and that's just never sat well with me.
All right, I could totally see that. Especially the combination of, it makes sense. Start of the round is when you do it, and then you can't attack until you activate, if that's correct. So, and then once you do activate,
it's next activation.
Right. So it's till its next activation, which is that turn though, I think. But the point is it's like you gotta, in a game where priorities and things happen so crazily, this is like planned out perfectly to make it a great card, which is exactly when you want to attack in the turn, right? And that like never happens. So because once you do, then the card's gone. So you're putting this card on a unit that you don't care about attacking until the very end of the turn, basically, or the round, basically.
Okay. And in a Night's Watch army, you're running normally elite units, so you don't have that many activations to burn through.
Right. Yeah. So early in the round, because of your elite unit activation count, this card is going to be gone. So they can just wait until the card's gone, because you have to activate, and then attack that unit.
Exactly.
All right. So Brett, anything to add for that one?
Yeah, I actually tried Donald Noy before I went to Jon Snow, like a jerk. But I got a little bit of mileage out of this card, but at the time, Flademan had a 2+ save, so I would essentially throw my Flademan out there, maybe not into the best position they could be in, but draw a little fire, and then I would play that card and effectively maintaining a 2-up save, even if they had Sundering, which was the only thing that could modify it.
Right.
So it kept those Flademen alive, but the problem I would end up finding is just like you guys are saying, Night's Watch generally don't have a ton of activations, so if you're in a spot where they can kind of wait that unit out and then gangbang them, it gave me some issues. But overall, it's not a terrible card, I don't think, but it all hinges on what you were able to kill and where the activation advantage is. If it's not in your favor, it's going to be wasted. If it is in your favor, they're not really going to have a choice but to go at that unit if they're sitting on a token. And I think that's kind of what it was designed for, was stick that unit in the center, like in Game of Thrones, on the token, and then you're this almost impervious block sitting on this objective that they want to take you from, and it's probably not going to happen. But yeah, just like you guys mentioned, the downside to the card being they out-activate you, they wait you out, and you have no choice but to activate. The card is removed, and then they come in and punch you in the teeth. So
Right. I will say silver lining on this one that I can think of is the trigger, and with Night's Watch, I can't really think of another one. So it's kind of like you might as well play it because
they don't have any other stuff.
yeah, they're not going to have any other start of the round cards to interfere with it. So sure, let's see what it does. And I guess at the minimum, it's a deterrent, right? So it's kind of puts a little control on the battlefield aspect. But
It
yeah,
does. If they've got a unit in striking range, and that's not the unit you want attacking you, you can give them the choice to either charge in and attack you now, or you're going to send something in to charge them so that they're not going to charge you and attack you. So it does have some playability. But
I'm open to this. Like, I've seen this card played once, so I'm open to the conversation. But just the one time I've seen it played, it was.
oh yeah, we're not picking on you. I think the basis of the discussion with these least favorites is trying to change each other's minds on them. So and that comes full circle with the listeners. Well, if you guys are listening, change your minds on all these cards that we've mentioned for our least favorites. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to the top 5's favorite and least favorite tactic cards currently in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's been an absolute blast to chat with Brett and John again. And who knows, we might get back on another topic. If you guys have a suggested topic, go ahead and throw them down below in the comment section. Please like and subscribe. And John and Brett, any farewell thoughts?
I would just love for someone to change my mind, honestly. So yeah, jump in the comments section. I'll jump on YouTube periodically and try to engage with anybody that's wanting to have a debate, a friendly debate, or just an otherwise discussion. And yeah, I would love to hear thoughts and share your experiences and tell us just why we're wrong.
Same here. I'm definitely open and open to what people have to say, and I'd love to hear difference of opinions.
It was a blast. Thanks again. And remember to keep the peace.